Novel Navigator. Chapter 121, Saint Amilla. Warmth. A figure was sleeping under a thick blanket. The figure's chest rose and fell rhythmically as they slept soundly. It was dark outside the windows. It was night. A slight mist had come from the mountains and settled in the valley. Adam's eyelids fluttered. He was about to wake up. While slowly waking up, he heard distant noises. Those clearly didn't come from the same room but from outside. Perhaps from downstairs. He opened his eyes. It was so quick that it almost looked like he had already been awake, just resting his eyes shut. Blanket. Adam sat up and slowly removed the blanket, but he was immediately hit by a wave of familiar cold and the memory of the sea. He covered himself up again. His skin had turned paler than usual, almost blue, like ice. There was a frigid feeling still lingering in his bones. Where am I? He looked around the unfamiliar room. It made him wonder whether he was still dreaming. At first, he thought he had died and got thrown back into the real world. However, the room in the Navy townhouse wasn't as warm as this one or as cozy. I was found. Adam sat on the edge of the bed, pulled the blanket with him, and stood up from the bed. It was hard to walk at first, but he managed to take a few steps towards the door. He wrapped the blanket around his freezing body, then made his way through the door, then down the hallway that led to the staircase. He made his way down the steps. The sounds became louder and had hints of familiarity. An arm suddenly wrapped around his shoulder and squeezed in a comforting manner. Finally, you wake up, Adam turned to see Zahn grinning at him. His cheeks were already flushed and clearly drunk, but he was still in complete control of himself. A mere alcoholic drink wouldn't be able to shake the mercenary's state of mind. Zahn. Adam whispered. What happened? How am I here? You're awake. Lucette heard noises and came over to see Adam, who had finally woken up. Her voice was full of joy as she jumped to Adam, pressing her chest against his face and hugging her in a motherly fashion. Hearing that, the rest also came to the staircase, joyous to see Adam awake and well. It was truly shocking to hear the ringing of a bell and then pass out Adam on the doorsteps. He just appeared there, out of nowhere. They tried to ask around if someone knew who brought him, but no one had an idea. A couple of the council's members also visited their living place, coming to talk about Adam's sudden appearance. They were clearly hoping to see Adam awake so they could speak to him, but they couldn't linger around for too long either, or it was clear that they had some other reasons for being there. Footsteps came from the steps above them. Digby also came after hearing the commotion, a relieved smile on his face. He was the happiest after seeing Adam on the doorsteps. Adam. Digby nodded, sounding formal. You must be surprised to be here. Yet. Adam scratched the back of his head. How am I here? Let's take a seat by the fireplace, you must be freezing, and we'll explain everything to you. They left the steps of the staircase. It was too narrow there, and then they went to the next room. Everyone continued patting Adam on the shoulder, welcoming him back warmly. Adam took a seat closest to the fireplace. Its logs are crackling softly, filling the room with warmth. It was very warm, as they knew that Adam was freezing, almost like a block of ice, so they had been warming up the house for hours after his return. It was so warm that others even sweated but didn't complain, knowing that Adam was in desperate need of the warmth. With a blanket and a fireplace next to him, Adam still felt slightly cold. Not as bad as before, though. The color started to return to his face as well. Mind telling us what happened first? Digby asked. Adam nodded and began from the beginning. Telling everything he talked about with Amilla. Then he talked about what happened after that and where he ended up after falling to the sea. It was all Arya's doing, after all, Valera spat out angrily. It's unfortunately all hearsay. We cannot accuse her of anything. I thought someone of her caliber wanted you to be on her side, Digby said with a frown. To think that she would straight up kill you for refusing her offer. That sounds badly thought of, no? Zahn said. Adam would have just lost a couple of months. It's not a big deal. He can start from over, and Arya would have made an enemy out of S-ranker. Every month counts, Digby said. A war is coming. There's no stopping. Digby had a simple thought about Arya's plan. She didn't care about the status that came with having an S-ranker in the same faction. It didn't really matter to her. A strength, on the other hand, did. If Adam wasn't strong enough before the Great War came, then he would be pretty useless to everyone. Thus, if he refused her, she wanted him killed so that he would waste precious months. He would only bring status to the faction. It could increase the numbers of that specific faction, but she didn't care about that. She already had a big guild and an even larger army backing her. She only needed strong members. Do you know who saved you, Adam? Lucette asked, rubbing her warm hand on his shoulder, comforting him like a mother. No, Adam shook his head. I guess I passed out. The gathering starts tomorrow, Digby said. Stay here. I am not putting you in danger's way anymore. But... Adam sighed but realized why, and then he slowly nodded. I'll stay put. What should we do with the shattered shields? Zahn asked. We killed their guild master. Amela is dead. Adam asked in surprise. Yet. Valera nodded. She fought back hard, but it wasn't enough. A war might be heading our way, Digby said. Luckily, Amela was their only royal princess. They do have a couple of prime mercenaries, but I think I can take care of them. Their home base is in Imperium City, Lucette said. However, I think they'll leave. They are not strong enough to live there anymore, or they'll get swallowed by other guilds. We'll need to be careful here, Digby said. The rumors spread like wildfire. I wouldn't be surprised if they already know we killed their guild master. Adam stayed quiet. This news took him by the surprise. It left him with a sour taste in his mouth. I suppose this was her goal, after all. When I was on that wretched rock, I was thinking about what she was possibly thinking. She was going to quit the game nonetheless. Her life went way differently in my past life there. She ended up marrying the king, gave him a couple of children, and lived a life of luxury in the palace. She was also a crowned saint. Of the orphanage it was renamed Saint Amela's Orphanage. I wonder if she'll be happier with her current life. Only time will tell, I suppose. Chapter 122, Arxam the Introvert. A glorious and burning bonfire roared with flames near the town's square. The mercenaries danced and sang around it, celebrating the start of the gathering. They used broken furniture and old wooden crates as fuel to feed the fire. Those had no use either way, so they might as well use them to light up the night and keep warm. It was a big party. Everyone mingled with each other, sharing stories and laughter throughout the night. They drank, ate delicious barbecue, and danced under the stars. The start of the gathering was just a few hours away. No one bothered to go to sleep. The excitement was palpable in the air. The Crimson Hounds arrived at the party. They had their own small party in their living quarters while waiting for their young genius to wake up. Now, he was awake, and well, the chill on his bones was long gone, and he also joined them for the festivities. Look! Zahn came to him and looked discreetly at the group of people gathered around one of the dining tables. They didn't seem to share the festival feeling. There was not a single smile on their faces. They are part of the Amarin brothers, aren't they? Adam said casually. Yet. Zahn laughed. See their sour faces? They were celebrating the loudest when they heard news of your death, so they celebrated loud enough for us to hear. They look like clowns now. Then, people from various guilds came up to Adam and congratulated him on his quick recovery. They were all smiling and praising him for the things that transpired in the tutorial. Adam was no stranger to such things. The weak often curried favor with him. This time, they did it for his potential future. He just smiled and nodded. Once the first group came to talk and praise him, another group followed in succession, all smiling from ear to ear. It was surprising to Adam that their mouths didn't become numb from smiling so much. The other Crimson Hounds went to get some food and drinks. They knew Adam would be busy for the next couple of hours. No one wanted to miss a chance to talk to the newly crowned S-ranker. However, Digby didn't go to drink or eat. He stood nearby, his posture straight and alert. He was keeping an eye on Adam, making sure nothing unexpected would happen like a bodyguard. After another group came and went, Adam's smile faded slightly, and he hoped that he had some drinks to quench his parched tongue. He didn't want to drink alcoholic drinks. The gathering was just a few hours away. He was too weak to deal with the effects of drunkenness. Another figure stepped forward. The figure clearly wanted to talk to him. Adam felt a little bit frustrated, but he didn't show it on his face. He just forced another smile and looked at the figure. With an angular and handsome face, the figure extended a hand towards Adam to shake. Adam was quite speechless, recognizing the person. The figure didn't speak a word. His hand still extended into a handshake. Adam grabbed the hand and shook it. "Hello," Arksum said very formally. His snow-white hair reached his ears, and he was very handsome with cold silver eyes. He was also muscled like a bull. It was a fascinating sight. Two S-rankers standing face to face. "Hi," Adam replied. Arksum nodded, then he turned around and walked away. It was such a brief and weird encounter. He went back to eat his barbecue in peace. Arksum the introvert, Adam wryly smiled. A shadow of the brilliant star, Saphira. The year 2145 was a fascinating year. It was a year when two legendary geniuses appeared in the same tutorial. They also happened to be siblings Saphira and Arksum. They dominated the tutorial. No one else in the tutorial had any chance to show their prowess, so these two were the only ones who became mercenaries from that tutorial group. They were just too shiny like two beautiful comets. Back then, there wasn't a council. The S-rankers were designed among the handlers. They had no choice but to give both of them S-rank titles. They were truly exceptional. They had seen monsters like Conrad Moriarty and Mauricio Slaughter also dominate their tutorial groups. However, Saphira and Arksum didn't only dominate, they completely obliterated the competition. Saphira was the more famous of the siblings. She was known for her unparalleled skills and strategic brilliance on the battlefield. Everyone knew that she would fight for the throne one day. She was destined to rule. Arksum, the Shadow, was her loyal protector and confidant, always watching her back. He was a quiet man, always standing in the shadow, watching and waiting. However, he was strong. Strong like a monster. There was a saying, if you hurt Saphira, a monster will come after you. That monster was Arksum, the strongest man of his rank. A man that was basically responsible for the Second Guild War, Adam thought. His death was the start of conflict between the Star and Death factions. The Otherworld Killer killed him in his virtual reality pod. There was a rumor that the Otherworld Killer was Calamity himself. Everyone knew that if they fought in Mortal Online, Arksum would win every time. If Arksum were alive for the Second Great Guild War, Star faction would have had an easy victory. That's why everyone believed Calamity killed him. If Arksum stayed alive, he would have never been able to get the throne, never. Adam felt strange. He knew so much about the future that seeing some of these legendary figures alive left a strange taste in his mouth. He then licked his dry lips and headed back to their living quarters. There was at least a sink where he could get some cold water. Digby followed him with his eyes and kept his Kiryoka focused on him. He reached the door and was about to open it, but then he heard a cough. Cough. An old man with a cane in hand walked towards him. His cough sounded like he was having trouble breathing. Adam turned to him, frowning. He didn't know who he was. However, the old man's cane had the sigil of the Imperial Order. Imperial Order. Hello, young man, cough. Corey wiped his mouth with a napkin and smiled weakly. May we have a word? Who are you? Adam asked. Name's Corey. The old man answered. I'm just an old man, but I am currently acting as a spokesman for the king. Adam removed his hand from the doorknob, keeping the door closed. Can we go for a walk? Corey asked. I want to show you something. Adam frowned, not too sure. He then saw Digby standing somewhat far, but looking towards them. It was almost like he heard it all. He nodded, as if he were giving his approval. Sure. Adam nodded and walked with him away from the bonfire, heading to a dark forest, with the trees moving like something half alive, their wooden fingers scratching against each other. I am very happy that you are fine, Corey said with an elderly smile. When I heard what happened to you, I felt like my old heart couldn't handle such shock. Gladly, you are fine. Thanks. Adam didn't know how to answer that, therefore, his thanks sounded like a question. Corey just smiled and headed deeper into the forest. Adam followed closely behind, not exactly sure where they were going. They were approaching a small mountain. Its peak barely above the tree line. Chapter 123, Hot Spring. The branches and greenish vines draped down the side of the mountain like a cascading waterfall of nature. They were tangled, almost like they were performing an ugly dance. It was exactly where Corey was heading towards that wall. Adam raised an eyebrow. He wondered whether the old man wanted to climb up the small mountain using the branches and vines as a makeshift ladder. He doubted the old man would be able to climb with his frail body. Walking alone seemed like a strenuous task to complete for him. Corey, using the cane, moved the branches and vines out of the way, almost like he was opening a flap to the tent. Instead, there was a nature-made entrance to a strange cave. What's this place? Adam asked. Come in, and you'll see. Corey said, beckoning him inside. They stepped through the nature-made entrance. The branches and vines came back down, blocking the light of the moon from the outside world. It became very dark. Corey put his cane against the wall and brought out a small lighter. With a flick of his thumb, a small flame appeared at the end. It wasn't much light, but enough. They headed deeper into the small cave and came across the hot spring. It wasn't steaming anymore. The water was still bright, but the fog was gone and the air was warm. A hot spring. Not just any hot spring, Corey said. The king himself found this a couple of summers ago. What makes this so special? Adam asked, crouched near the water, and dipped his hand into the warm pool. His eyes widened. The tips of his fingers tingled as if tiny sparks of electricity danced across them. A hot spring that can heal you, increase your talent, help you learn any skill, increase your mastery over the three powers, and even improve your appearance. Adam frowned. It sounded far too good to be true. He hadn't heard anything like this exist in the world of Mortal Online before. If something like that existed, why was he shown this? It was fishy. You must be wondering, why did I show you this? Yes, why? Adam looked over to him. The king wanted you to take a bath on it, Corey said. He has given the privilege to every S-ranker so far. Saphira and Arxam took baths yesterday, Calamity and Mauricio just took baths this morning. Why? Adam asked. Why indeed? Corey chuckled. Don't bother trying to know his motive. It's a mystery that only King himself knows the answer to. Adam looked at the hot spring. It doesn't look active right now. It doesn't have any steam. The water was also rather cold for a hot spring. Corey chuckled, not saying a word, and took his cane, then left the cave with the sound of tapping the cane following after him. He took the light with him, dark enveloping the cave once again. Ha, ha 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 ha. Adam laughed. It was a creepy sound that echoed through the darkness. This was perhaps his luckiest moment. He thought he would have to find this cave himself by searching around the forest like a headless chicken. To think that he was brought here willingly. Of course, he knew about this cave. He heard plenty about it. While he knew that this cave existed, he didn't know anything about this hot spring. It was a complete surprise for him as well. He didn't want to come here for the hot spring either way. It was what awaited him at the depths of the hot spring that intrigued him the most. The hot spring was deep. It reached 30 meters deep. Now I know how Calamity found that thing. He must have been here taking his bath when he stumbled upon it. Weird that the king never found it when he is owning this place. Adam smiled and started taking off his clothes, starting with the armor, then his boots, and finally his tunic, and soon stood buck naked. The water splashed as he entered the hot spring. It was rather cool. Only the air was warm. The bottom of the hot spring was smooth, 30 meters deep, and filled with round-shaped rocks that acted as natural footholds. From the gaps between the rocks, steam and hot water rushed up. The steam was so thick that it obscured his vision. It was pleasantly warm. It wasn't so hot that it burned his skin, but it was hot enough to relax his muscles and soothe his tired body. Without visibly knowing, his body, mind, and everything in between started changing. It was the majestic effect of the hot spring. The shield charge skill, the one still stuck at 0%, started magically learning itself. Same with the ground king skill, but slowly. It didn't matter if the hot spring helped to learn skills, Adam's body still lacked the power to completely learn them. In the depths of his mind, the mana ocean started filling up with more water, gushing out in all directions. It wasn't any longer a mere puddle. His mind also expanded. It helped his Kiryoku improve a little bit. However, he was still miles away from reaching the second level. His craft learning had made no progress. After all, he hadn't gotten his hands on the scroll yet. Adam's skin turned fairer. It was a discreet change, but it was a subtle transformation. The hidden muscles on his arms and chest had become more defined. Those were also very subtle transformations. It wasn't noticeable enough yet. Adam let out a relaxed sigh, leaned his back against the edge of the hot spring, and closed his eyes. There was no need to hurry for him yet. The real reason why he wanted to get here hadn't appeared yet. It was still a little bit over an hour until the beginning of the gathering. Ah, my back! Corey dragged his feet, keeping himself up with the cane while he made his way down the dark forest. It was hard for him to walk through the forest. There were treacherous roots, slippery rocks, and low-hanging branches that threatened to trip him at every step. A soft-looking hand moved one of the branches out of the old man's way. Saint Corey! I didn't know you were also here. Corey raised his head with great struggle. His old vision needed a moment to clear up before he could see the figure standing in front of him. After a few blinks, he recognized the familiar face and smiled warmly. Young Yu, you've grown so much since the last time I saw you. Lady Yu smiled warmly. She didn't have her veil on, revealing her kind and pure face, which has aged gracefully over the years. With each blink, her long eyelashes, almost like she had eyelash extensions, fluttered gently against her rosy, blushed cheeks. What are you doing here? Corey asked gently, seeing the town's buildings looming near. The party is ongoing. I wanted to visit the hot spring. Lady Yu said and touched her soft cheek. I am afraid that my skin has been feeling dry lately. Nonsense, haha. Corey laughed with a reassuring smile. I am dry, wrinkly, and all that. You are as beautiful as ever. A goddess among mortals, if I may say so myself. Humph, Lady Yu playfully pouted. You make me blush. You old flirt. You wanted to visit the hot spring? Corey asked, holding the cane with both hands. Yes, is it currently free? Lady Yu asked innocently. Corey smiled. Yes, it is currently free. If my old mind remembers correctly, haha. Then I'll be on my way, she said with a smile and a skip in her step. Corey watched as she disappeared into the depths of the forest. The low-hanging branches hid her from view. The flow of destiny. He whispered. Chapter 124, Iman and Seth. A black-sailed ship was anchored near the northern shore of Kuro Island. Its black flag, with a skull that seemed to be hysterically laughing, rippled in the wind. On the lower level of the three-masted ship, hunching behind a large wooden barrel, Seth waited nervously for the pirates to leave for the island. However, they never did. He had already been waiting a couple of days, yet they didn't seem to be planning to go anywhere anytime soon. I thought they were going to participate in the gathering. What's taking so long? Seth anxiously thought. He was already tired, hungry, and frustrated. It was just a matter of time before he was discovered. He was lucky that the lower levels were infested by rats and spiders, so no one wanted to come here willingly unless absolutely necessary. I'll need to find out what the hell is going on up there. Seth left his hiding place. He crept cautiously down the lower levels, the hanging lanterns lighting up his way. The lower level had a musty smell that made his stomach churn. It was filled with old crates, some broken furniture, and dust-covered cobwebs that hung from the ceiling. Here must be something I can use. Seth opened some barrels, then crates, and searched through the contents, hoping to find something useful. It was just old junk. However, from his third opened crate, he found some old clothes, pirate clothes that were either torn, blood-stained, or battle-worn. It was exactly what he was looking for. He quickly changed his clothes, a loose-fitting linen shirt, a richly colored vest, and knee-length breeches with leather boots, and it made him look like a true pirate, ready to set sail on the high seas. However, the glasses on his nose were not very pirate-like. It reduced his menacing appearance. Seth realized it and quickly removed them before pocketing them in the vest pocket. He didn't have a weapon on him. He tossed away the tutorial's pitchfork the moment he arrived in Driftwood. Some would think it was foolish to get rid of his only weapon, but it made him think of his rival, Adam. He would rather be weaponless than use something given to him. Seth found a belt in the crate. It was a loose belt, but it would have to do. He fastened it around his waist. He steeled his expression, then crept across the lower level until he arrived at the ladder of the hatch. He climbed it up, shoving the hatch door open and emerging onto the deck of the ship. A cold wind whipped against his face, stinging his cheeks with icy fingers. It was very early in the morning, the sun had yet to rise over the horizon, and the sky was still a dark shade of blue. Seth turned around and accidentally bumped into a muscle-chested man who towered over him, glaring down with a scowl on his face. "What were you doing there?" Edwardius demanded an answer. Seth's words got stuck in his throat. This must be the most intimidating man he's ever seen. He felt like every lie of his would end in failure. Thus, he didn't dare to speak. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Edwardius asked, his piercing gaze never leaving Seth's eyes. Seth shook his head. He could feel the lump forming in his throat, making it impossible for him to respond. "That's because I had it," Edwardius said, bringing out a sun-gazing tool. "The captain was looking for this, wasn't he?" Seth slowly nodded. He didn't know what tool that was or what he was talking about, but he still nodded because he thought it was the wisest thing to do at this very moment. "Go on, take it to the captain." Edwardius shoved the tool into Seth's hands and left to bark orders at the rest of the crew. Seth looked down at the tool in his hands. It was light and oddly shaped, it resembled binoculars, but with just one lens. Sun-gazing tool. He looked over the upper floor of the ship. There were 2 stairs leading up there, and there was a single door that led to the captain's quarters. Seth steeled his nerves and made his way up the right stair, gripping the railing tightly. His footsteps were silent, as he didn't dare to make a sound. By the moment he arrived at the door, his heart was pounding in his chest. "Come in." A voice came from inside. He didn't even have time to knock on the door. Seth opened the door with his free hand, while the other was holding the sun-gazing tool, and stepped into the room cautiously. The room was dark and musty, with a single candle flickering in the corner. There were maps of different areas of the sea nailed to the walls, clothes hanging from pegs, and a large wooden desk covered in papers and nautical instruments. "You look afraid. Do I frighten you, kid?" Iman asked, sitting behind the desk. Seth's legs almost buckled underneath the weight of Iman's aura. It was suffocating and overwhelming, consuming every breath he took. Iman just chuckled and returned to examining the maps spread out in front of him. Seth's fear wasn't suspicious. Every man and woman on this ship were afraid of the mad pirate. Iman had black hair like night itself with handsome facial features sharp enough to cut through steel. He was dressed in an open front vest, a billowy white shirt underneath, brown trousers, and tall black boots. There was also a brown tricorn hat on his desk, but it was mostly unworn as he didn't like wearing hats indoors. He looks somewhat familiar, Seth thought with a frown. But far more scary. Iman's face resembled a certain face found on a coin. "Bring me my tool," Iman said, pointing at the spot beside the tricorn hat. Seth stopped by the desk, placed the sun-gazing tool beside the hat, and stepped back to the door. With a bow, he planned to leave the room. "Now, I don't remember having any new recruits." Iman tore his gaze off the map. "Who are you?" Seth's heart skipped a beat. The fear creeped inside him like icy tendrils wrapping around his chest. "You are too weak to be an assassin," Iman chuckled. "Who are you?" "And name's Seth," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you in my ship, Seth?" Iman asked, adding extra weight to the name Seth. "The gathering." Seth whimpered. I wanted to participate in the gathering." "Who doesn't?" Iman laughed. "You do have balls, I give you that. Still, you're an innocent and foolish pup. A brat who doesn't know more about the world than a frog in the well." "Why?" Seth gulped. "Why haven't you gone to the island?" Iman chuckled and went to the window, opening it enough for the island to appear. "Mercenaries are dealing with stuff on the island. Pirates are on the water, ensuring that if there are some black chaos beings that escape, we take care of them." "Damn it!" Seth cursed inwardly and asked. "What'll you do to me?" "No worries, we'll spend more time together," Iman laughed and shouted. "Ed!" The door opened, and the muscle-chested giant of a man, Edwardius, stepped into the room. "Take the impostor and throw him to the brig." "Gladly." Edwardius grabbed Seth by the back of his neck, as if he were a disobedient puppy, and took him away, while Seth tried to resist the tears that welled up in his eyes. Iman's smile froze over. He coldly looked out of the window, towards the island and all the way to the town of Kuroshima. Chapter 125, Black Sun. The sun rose from the horizon. The dark shade left the sky as the world was bathed in a warm, golden light. It was a beautiful sight to behold. However, then something changed. Around the bottom corner of the sun, a faint black haze began to form. Slowly spreading across the sun. The sky grew dimmer, and the warm light started to fade away. Black Sun it was called. It only comes around once a year, during the day of the gathering. Across the lands of the New World, early woken up citizens turned their gazes over to the sky. Some prayed. Some kneeled. Some wept. It was believed that during the day of the Black Sun, the dark god of blackened hearts would wake up, blink its eyes, and unleash chaos upon the world with its army of black-hearted creatures. On Kuro Island, the mercenaries saw the arrival of the Black Sunday. They knew it was time. They raised their weapons, roared towards the sun, and started spreading across the island, looking for the creatures of the evil god. There was a boulder sitting peacefully at the edge of a cliff, with a roaring river flowing below. It had been there for centuries. The boulder started trembling. The ground started shaking. It was like an earthquake was about to strike. Then, the boulder cracked from the middle, like a giant egg hatching. From the cracked boulder emerged a creature unlike any other, his black hair and eyes resembling those of nightly creatures. He stood up, not uttering a single word, even though he looked like he could speak if he wanted to. From behind, he looked like a human. The black hair cascading down the back of his neck, his naked back exposed, his back muscles rippling with every movement. He had black hair and eyes as well, and a pale complexion with smooth skin that seemed almost translucent under the sun. Handsome, very much so, but he didn't seem to have any emotions. As he stood there, naked like he was just born, his chest opened up a hole the size of a brick at the center of it, and inside his body, there was a black heart, as if it were roasted over a fire. In the vast world of the New World, chaos beings wasn't the only threat to humanity. Their existence was kept under wraps, under hushed whispers, as even those who knew about them were afraid to speak of them openly. Black hearts, the creatures created by the dark god of blackened hearts. Within the hot spring, the warm steam rose up in a thick mist and fell in gentle waves over the rocks. Adam, with his eyes closed, enjoyed the warm bath. It was an intoxicating feeling, the feeling of becoming stronger by just bathing in these magical waters. Unfortunately, the more he used the hot spring, the less effect it would have. After a couple of years of using it, the effect it had on King Moriarty was non-existent. During the first time using it, the effects were the greatest. Afterwards, the magic of the hot spring was much lesser, almost making no difference, except to make the person feel amazing and refreshed for a short while. Adam softly opened his eyes and reached out to his trousers on the rocky floor. He took out a timepiece from his pocket and checked the time. It was time. Black hearts must have awakened. He was aware of the scary truth behind this island. Black hearts, it was something Sapphira revealed to him. It wasn't their strength that he feared, but what they could achieve. Their only goal was to resurrect their evil god, the dark god of blackened hearts, and if they succeeded, the world would be plunged into eternal darkness. Mortal Online had severe consequences for failure. If mercenaries failed to protect humanity, millions of originals would die, and the world would be doomed to an eternity of suffering and despair. The closest thing to that happening was with Loya, the demoness who ate the Sunday. She wasn't exactly the demoness, but just her vassal of destruction. She created destruction everywhere she went, bathing the world with her flames. She received her name during the height of her destruction when she devoured the sun itself, plunging the world into darkness. The New World was in darkness for several years. It was cold and desolate. Chaos beings rampaged through the land. In the end, King Moriarty, with his imperial order, managed to restore the sun and kill the demoness. He received the title of Hero of Humanity. Those years were never remembered as fondly. A record number of mercenaries died during those years. Some outright just quit, unable to handle the constant bloodshed. Adam sat on the edge of the hot spring, ready to do the thing he came here to do. It was only possible during the Black Sunday. At the bottom of the hot spring, the round-shaped rocks cracked and got sucked into the swirling vortex below. A strange portal appeared. Adam pinched his nose, took a deep breath, and submerged himself in the water. The portal's sucking power was so great that he was instantly pulled towards it. With no chance to fight back, he was pulled through the portal, vanishing. The portal vanished as soon as it came, and the round-shaped rocks rolled back into place, leaving no trace of what had just happened. A while later, a person stepped through the vine-covered entrance and stopped by the warm, hot spring. The warm mist fell over her skin like a gentle caress. Lady Yu crouched and touched the warm water with a smile. She could already feel her skin becoming smoother and fairer. She stood up, kicked her sandals off, and slid the dress off her shoulders. It fluttered to the ground in a whisper of silk. She waded into the water, feeling the cool liquid envelop her body. She floated there, feeling weightless and serene. The hot spring was deep, but for some odd reason, it didn't try to pull her down. She didn't even have to hold herself up. With a gentle smile on her face, she closed her eyes and drifted off into a peaceful slumber. Her chest peeked out of the water, too heavy to stay afloat. Thump! Adam fell from a dark ceiling and landed on the hard ground below. It wasn't warm anymore. It was cold and damp, and he could feel the chill sinking into his bones. With a shudder, he took out some of his clothes from his inventory and put them on. It was still cold, but at least it was slightly better than being completely naked. Where am I? He wondered to himself. Calamity never explained what he saw inside this place, only that he destroyed the respawn crystal. Adam looked around. It was dark, and there was nothing here. It was like he was standing in the middle of a void. At that moment, the ceiling slightly further away opened up. With a glow of light, something fell to the ground. After a further moment, Adam realized it was a crystal, the respawn crystal. That was easier than I expected. Adam drew his sword from his inventory. He slowly approached the crystal, creeping forward. Like a shadow. He arrived at the crystal, his sword raised. Someone suddenly clapped him on the shoulder, the impact sending a shockwave through his body. I don't recognize you, a dark voice said. Who are you? Chapter 126, The Soul of the Dark God of Blackened Hearts. Adam whirled around to see who had just spoken. His sword stabbed through a mass of black smoke, and he only saw a pair of white eyes and a mouth of sharp teeth within the smoke. What? Adam frowned, backstepped, and went behind the crystal, his sword ready to slash down. It was almost like he was holding the crystal hostage. He didn't expect to meet some kind of smoke monster. After all, he was clearly touched in the shoulder just now, and he believed if he removed his sleeve, there would be a handprint on his shoulder. Who are you, insolent pig? The smoke monster hissed, its voice echoing in the dark cavern. It wanted to approach the young man, but he touched the crystal with his sword, scratching the blade across the smooth, jagged surface. The smoke monster stopped. Calamity never mentioned this smoke monster. Is it the guardian of the crystal? Ha, 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 ha. The smoke monster laughed irregularly. Its mouth, with its jagged teeth and forked tongue, opened wide in an eerie smile. You wouldn't dare. I wouldn't. Adam smacked the crystal with the blunt side of the sword, causing a crack in the surface. The smoke monster flinched. Its black mass turned red, as if it had turned angry, and it let out a deafening screech. You don't understand what you're doing. Then tell me what I am doing. Adam grabbed the sword's hilt with both hands and pointed the sword down. With one wrong move by the smoke monster, Adam would just stab the sword through the crystal. He had the upper hand. That's the soul of the dark god of blackened hearts, the smoke monster explained. You'll get cursed, your heart will blacken out, and you'll become a servant to evil for all eternity. Curses are real. These kinds of threats are not to be taken lightly. Adam furrowed his brows, feeling troubled. He thought about Calamity and whether there were any signs of him being cursed, but he was already a servant to evil, a murderer, so it was hard to tell if he was suffering from any curse at all. It would be easier if the person who destroyed the crystal was kind-hearted, but unfortunately, that was not the case. This creature is not Blackheart. It is chaos being, smoke chaos entity, and it cannot be trusted. Its level of intelligence is high, so its strength should be as well, but that's the thing with smoke chaos entities, they are actually not that strong. They are often deceptive and rely on trickery to defeat their opponents. If chaos beings had an army, they would be strategists and spies rather than brute force warriors. Adam didn't know what to do. The smoke monster was most likely deceiving him, but he couldn't be sure. He had his Kyryoko activated. However, he couldn't tell what the smoke monster was feeling. It was nervous, that's for sure, but also excited about something. Excited about the black sun, probably. Adam thought. The smoke monster kept its eyes on Adam. It was hesitant to make any moves. It didn't have a lot of fighting prowess, except for a few magic spells it could summon. Destroying the respawn crystal. I wanted to do it so that Calamity wouldn't get it, as it helped him to get a mass following and become a formidable powerhouse. I have a good reason to find the crystal as well. Corey is able to back me up, so it wouldn't look suspicious that this was my second destroyed respawn crystal. The destruction of the crystal would help me cement my position as a genius at the level of the S-rankers. It's important to keep up the role. If it ever becomes clear that I am not much of a genius, it'll mean death of me. Destroying a respawn crystal also gives experience points. 1,500, to be exact. It would be enough for me to reach level 3. A level of order giver. Adam was still hesitant. He wasn't sure whether he wanted to risk getting a curse. The curses were curable. However, a curse from the dark god of blackened hearts would definitely be difficult to remove. It didn't seem worth the risk. Adam made up his mind. Fine, I'll leave, Adam said, and he pointed the sword at the smoke monster. Back away, now. The smoke monster listened and flew to the other end of the dark cavern. It was smiling, but it was also nervous. The human could trick it, destroy the crystal, and try to quickly escape. Adam looked at the dark ceiling where he came from. It was not too high, but it was closed, and the portal was gone. Calamity mentioned leaving through the same place where he came from. He only brought the remnants of the destroyed respawn crystal with him to the outside world. Now, how can I leave? Adam crouched a little bit and jumped as high as he could. He managed to touch the ceiling with his fingertips before falling back down. Nothing changed. The ceiling, filled with black rocks, remained closed just as it had before. I can't leave. Adam wondered with a frown and tried again. Again, nothing happened. He tried cutting through the ceiling, but it was too thick. Adam frowned, trying to remember the stuff Calamity told others about this place. He was proudly telling his stories, hundreds of times even, so the most important parts he remembered. After destroying the crystal, the ceiling opened up. Adam turned his gaze to the crystal with a heavy heart. It was an extremely difficult decision to make. I can't leave without destroying it. The smoke monster felt something was odd. It ignored the order given to it and started to move towards Adam. Get away from it. Adam swung his sword in a flat, wide arc and sliced through the smoke monster, but made no solid contact with its form. The smoke monster flew through the blade, and two smoke hands emerged from its body. It was human hands, looking like they were covered in black gloves. It was heading straight to the crystal. It was the only thing that seemed to matter. Pull. Adam reached out his hand towards the crystal, and it flew past the smoke monster and into his hand. The room fell silent for a brief moment. Then, the smoke monster screamed and flew towards Adam in a rage. Give it back. Adam tossed the crystal in the air. It spun around in the air for a moment, then a steel blade sliced through the air, cutting the crystal in half. The crystal's brilliant glow vanished, and it fell to the ground in two pieces at first, but after making contact with the hard ground below, the pieces shattered into 1,000 tiny fragments. No. 000, 000. The smoke monster's voice trembled like a haunting melody, and then it slowly faded away into nothingness. It was somehow connected to the crystal at such a deep level that its destruction also killed it. You destroyed the soul of the dark god of blackened hearts. 5,000 XP acquired. Level up. Level 2-3. Level up. Level 3-4. Adam's eyes widened in shock. He didn't have any idea that this would happen. Usually, destroyed respawn crystals give 1500 experience points to the user. However, that was with the floor respawn crystals. This crystal was more valuable. It was the soul of the dark god of the blackened hearts. Within the depths of his body, power surged through him like a raging storm of strength. His strength had an immense leap, a whole 2-level increase was a very rare instance. Name, Adam Palestar. Level, 4. XP, 1677/2500. HP, 650/650. Rank, Mercenaryman Weapon, Gladius Sword and Heater Shield. Shine Coin, 1601. Skills. Little God. Basic Blade Handling. Ground King. Shield Charge. Pull. Push. Inventory Log Off. Chapter 127, Sorrow of Blackhearts. Adam pulled out a dirty, brown pouch from his inventory. It was a pouch to hold shine coins, but he had already put all of his shine coins into the interface. There were a few uses for the pouch: to give money away, deposit money through reality market into a real-life bank account, or hide the money in case of untimely death. Now, he unloosened the pouch's string and started picking up the small fragments of the crystal from the ground, then carefully placed them inside the pouch. He did it until the pouch was full and bulging like a man who had eaten away his hunger until his stomach almost bursted. Those lightless crystal fragments had no value. They were just proof. Adam placed the pouch inside his inventory, then felt something on his throat, as if a finger were scratching at the walls of his esophagus. He placed the side of his fist against his mouth, coughed once, and then felt the scratchy feeling disappear. What was that? Adam looked uncomfortable. His first thought was that it must have something to do with the curse. However, after a few seconds, he thought he was overthinking it, and it must have just been some dust in the air. He took a long glance at the interface. The rank of his hadn't changed. It wasn't something that the system was capable of changing. He had to take the order giver test beforehand, and if he cleared it, he would rank up. Swoosh! The wind started picking up in the dark cavern. This was the first time a wind blew in this wretched cavern that had no ending to it. The ceiling opened up like a sliding roof, revealing a spiraling portal that looked like a whirlpool of deep ocean. It started pulling Adam towards it with an irresistible force. As soon as he got swallowed by the portal, the ceiling closed again, and the cavern collapsed in on itself. Whether it was on top of a mountain, in the middle of the forest, inside a small cave, or at the beach, every black-hearted individual turned their gazes to the black sun with frightened gazes. They could feel it. No. The mercenaries, spread across different parts of the island, heard the unholy screams. They also realized that something must have happened. Arxam pushed his long-bladed axe through the chest of a black-eyed humanoid creature. Blood spewed out of the Blackheart's mouth, but then it let out a cry. It wasn't a cry of pain, it was a cry of sadness. Arxam frowned, pulled out his axe from the chest, and then plunged it deep into the creature's beating, black heart that was open for all to see. With the last cries of sadness, the creature collapsed on the ground in a lifeless heap. Its black heart had a deep cut that oozed dark, viscous blood. "Brother, do you feel this?" A beautiful, fair-skinned woman asked as she returned to her brother's side after slaying a fair share of blackhearts. "Yes, sister," Arxam said. Sap-Hero looked towards the black sun with melancholy. Her snow-white hair moved with the breeze. She had a red ribbon, shaped like devil horns, on her head. "They are mourning," she said. She could feel their sadness echoing through the air. At the west corner of the island, a pile of blackhearts was forming around the crumbling remains of an old shipwreck. Mercenaries, with death skulls on their backs, fought against blackhearts, their weapons clashing and blood spewing. The last remaining blackhearts got quickly overwhelmed and were added to the pile of corpses that were already beginning to rot under the black Sunday. Their focus was not on the fight, Calamity said, standing over the fallen bodies. But instead, somewhere else. Mauricio cut a black heart out of one of the bodies, slicing through the flesh that was glued to the heart like a grotesque masterpiece. He was a black-bearded man with a rough visage, like a pirate, who had seen too much violence at sea. He had a body like a muscled minotaur and a voice that boomed like thunder. He placed the heart in a jar and whispered a curse before sealing it shut. "Mauricio, what do you think it was?" Calamity asked, slightly tensed up. It was strange for him. Those black-hearted creatures didn't care that they were being sliced apart, their attention was completely elsewhere. "Who gives a fuck?" Mauricio tossed the jar to him. "Take it to the ship, and the rest of you maggots, start harvesting the black hearts." Calamity looked at the jar. The black heart was still beating inside. It was grotesque and disturbing. The rest of the mercenaries started harvesting the black hearts. The corpses, after having their black hearts taken out, were tossed into another pile by the shipwreck. The stench of death and decay hung in the air. It was the perfect atmosphere for the death mercenaries. Within the hot spring, the steam cloud swirled around the peaceful cave. It was as if there wasn't an island-wide battle happening just now. Lady Yu, with a smile on her face, rested her naked back against the rocky edge of the hot spring. She didn't notice it, but there was a pile of clothes right behind her, by the edge of the hot spring. Those were clearly a man's clothes: underwear, trousers, shirt, vest, boots, and a belt were scattered around. The thick steam just so happened to be covering them. The man who had been wearing them was nowhere to be seen. At that moment, her brows furrowed in confusion as the water started to rise and fall like a heavily breathing chest. She looked around and noticed that something odd was happening underwater. At the bottom of the hot spring, the round-shaped rocks collapsed, and a whirling portal of shimmering light appeared. However, this time, it didn't have any pulling force but instead lots of pushing power. A figure emerged from the portal, the pushing power forcing him up to the surface of the water. Splash! A large splash erupted from the air, splattering water across the walls of the cave and straight at the beautiful naked woman, whose face was one of shock. The portal disappeared, the round-shaped rocks falling back into their place with a loud plop. Adam, with his clothes fully drenched, emerged from the water with a startled expression on his face. The scenery around him changed so drastically. He was at the dark cavern, then was pulled up into the portal, then went through the water that felt like he was running through a tunnel of water. Then, finally, he arrived back at the hot spring. He wanted to take off his clothes immediately and change back to drier clothes, but then, with the corner of his eye, he saw a peak of soft-looking flesh that was shaped like a mound. "Ah!" a voice exclaimed softly. Adam's eyes turned wide, like a round moon, and he then shifted his gaze to the woman. Her eyes were round as well, a surprise on her face. She then saw his cheeks turn rosy, and she felt rather breezy. She then turned to look down, and noticed that she was still naked, just like when she was born. "Kaie." With a face full of embarrassment and a blush spread across her face, she covered her chest with her arms, which honestly didn't do much to cover her up. "Why is she here?" Adam averted his gaze, feeling his face heat up as well, but he didn't want to meet her yet. Not like this. He climbed out of the hot spring, the clothes drenched, while having him covered in a wet hug of cotton and silk. Lady Yu hid herself under the water, only a little bit of her face showing. It was still clear that she was pouting and angrily looking in the young man's direction. She expected a very big reaction from the curse of men. Lately, she had been feeling sick by just getting looked at, and now, being naked and stared at, she expected a full-blown curse. Yet, as time slowly went by, the young man picked up his clothes from beneath the steam cloud, and still, not a single thing happened from the curse. Instead, her heart started beating. Butterflies fluttered in her stomach. It was the completely opposite kind of reaction she expected. What is this? Chapter 128, 4S Rancors. Like a veil of smoke, the steam created a soft barrier between the two, making it difficult to see each other clearly. Lady Yu watched with a bashful expression as the young man picked up his clothes and began his walk to the exit. He didn't utter a single word. She had questions. She wanted to open her mouth and ask him who he was, but the words caught in her throat. She then remembered her meeting with little god. The curse of men or curse of love had been placed upon her, a curse that would stop her from falling in love with anyone but the soulmate, which the little god mentioned. It was a thought that lingered in her mind constantly, causing her both fear and excitement. However, only one person was destined to be her soulmate. She never expected to meet that person. Now, she met someone she didn't feel absolutely disgusted with. The thought of him being her soulmate crossed her mind more often than she cared to admit. She wanted to speak, but it was like trying to find the right words in a language she didn't fully understand. The young man didn't seem to hear her. He was already by the exit, pushing the vines out of the way with his left hand. "Wait," she said, but it was barely a whisper. It was already too late. The young man had left the cave, the vines falling back into place in front of the entrance. She looked disappointed, and her mouth closed in a defeated sigh. She didn't understand what was wrong with her. This was the first time she was too nervous to speak. When she met the little god for the first time, she was less nervous than now. It was like her heart was trying to escape from her chest. "Ba dump, ba dump, ba dump." She still remembered his face so vividly round, navy eyes widened in surprise, flesh flushed in a light pink, and lips slightly parted in awe when she saw her black hair. She thought it needed a little trim, but she still thought that he was strangely attractive. She had met all sorts of princes, kings, and holy men in her lifetime, most of them trying to become her suitor, and they were all good-looking, but there was something about him that stood out from the rest. Soulmate. Adam fast walked down the forest path, his heart pounding against his chest like a drum. Why is she here? She never came to the gathering before. It was impossible to forget the sight of her in the bath. It was almost like the sight was burned into his memory. Cursed. I was not ready to meet her. Adam clicked his tongue in frustration and leaped over some of the fallen trees. He then heard clashing weapons, rustling leaves, cracking twigs, and loud shouting. There were a lot of fights ongoing in almost every direction. That's why Adam was hurrying back to the town of Kuroshima. He was too weak to encounter Blackheart. It would be instant death. He started running, the wind whipping against his lengthy black hair. After a short while, he arrived back at the town, its streets emptied and the bonfire fires extinguished, but there was still some trash, bottles of alcohol, and pieces of broken glass scattered around. "Oh, you're back," Corey said from the porch of a house that was missing a few roof tiles and had boarded up windows. It wasn't used by any of the mercenary groups, as there had been rumors of this house being haunted. A few years ago, during the gathering, a whole guild went missing without a trace after spending the night inside. There were a few who knew some of those members back in the real world. After asking them about what had happened, they didn't get a single response back. They had all gone mute, blind, and deaf. They were in a complete vegetative state. Corey, however, didn't seem to be scared of the rumors. "What happened to you?" Corey asked with a frown. "You seem stronger." "This happened," Adam said, tossing the pouch to his feet. "I have something to tell you." Corey picked up the pouch, untied the string, and looked inside to find fragments of crystals. They had lost their luster and looked like small pieces of dull glass. He examined one of them, and it didn't take long for him to understand what it was. He inhaled deeply, recognizing the faint smell of sulfur. "You found it?" Corey asked in awe. "How?" "The bottom of the hot spring," Adam said, leaning against the railing of the porch. A portal opened up as soon as the black sun swallowed the real Sunday. I see. Corey chuckled, realizing it was silly. It was right in front of our nose all this time. That place had been searched fully hundreds of times, as it seemed the most ideal place for the respawn crystal. It was never searched during the black sun. Adam asked. No, Corey said. The king is usually busy during that time, as are members of the Imperial Order. Who would have thought that the black sun opens up a hidden room there? How's the raid going? Adam asked. I heard a lot of fighting. It's been intense, Corey replied. I heard there is a massive fight happening on the southern beach, near the harbor. It is an important place to defend, and we cannot allow them to take any ships. The South Beach. An army of armor-clad mercenaries battled against naked-bodied Blackhearts. The bloodshed, the screams echoed, and the clash of swords filled the air, creating a chaotic scene of war. There were 3 mercenary guilds present: Dying Star, Queen's Blades, and Crimson Hounds, and they were standing united against the might of Blackhearts. The Blackhearts, since their god's soul was destroyed, had only one goal left: leave this island and never return. At the front lines, Arxam's axe shredded through the bodies of the creatures, his axe glowing with a radiant glow of red. The people awed at the strength of the S-ranker. What a monster, haha. Zahn laughed while fighting side by side with Digby. You think Adam will become as much of a monster as Arxam one day? Who knows? Focus on the present, Digby said while clashing swords with the Blackhearts. After wiping out a Tier 2 guild before the Beach War, the Blackhearts took hold of their weapons. They were clumsy with them at first, but slowly, they began to show promise as skilled fighters. At that moment, they saw a white-haired woman leaping over them. She looked like a flying goddess, her movements were graceful and deadly. Saphira pulled the string on her bow and released a flurry of arrows. Those arrows were clad with purple craft, therefore, as soon as they hit their target, the bodies of the Blackhearts exploded with holes. It was almost like they were hit by bullets. Saphira, as soon as she landed in the midst of the Blackhearts, pulled out her silver sword from its sheath and cut through them with ease. With that, the mercenaries pushed onward, and the Blackhearts struggled to hold their ground. At that moment, a sound of a horn and the marching of men came from the beech forest. From there, a group of black-clad mercenaries emerged, blood on their faces. Men, kill these wretched creatures! Mauricio shouted and swung his sword down. The members of the Death Mercenaries flanked the Blackhearts, encircling them with the other 3 guilds. Calamity, with a grin on his face, sliced through the Blackhearts with his razor-sharp blade. Soon, he came across a beautiful white-haired woman who was almost dancing around the battlefield, the blood dripping off her blades like a macabre waltz. Ah, what a pleasant surprise, Calamity said to her with a flirtatious tone. The dancing blade, Saphira, was it? Saphira remained silent, feeling his gaze undressing her in more ways than one. Smash! At that moment, an axe burst through a skull of Blackheart, which fell right beside Calamity's feet. Calamity's words got stuck in his throat as he saw the axe-wielding man arrive at the scene. Arxam looked at Calamity with a cold gaze, a usual look for him, but Calamity didn't know that, as he had never seen such a cold gaze before. Those who were fighting alongside them realized something awe-inspiring. There are currently 4 S-rankers in the same battlefield, fighting against same foe. Most of them had never met S-rankers before. Now they met 4 at the same time. Chapter 129, The 5 Blackhearts. Help! A faint voice of help sounded. A man, barely conscious, used his bloodied nails to crawl like a worm away. His legs were mangled, his feet were completely shredded, and his back had long, stretchy scratch marks running down it. It was like he was attacked by a wild animal. Then, soft-sounding footsteps came behind him. It didn't sound like boots hitting the ground, but instead like someone walking barefoot on dirt. The man paled, recognizing those footsteps of doom. No. A dirt-covered foot touched his back and forced him to the ground. He couldn't crawl away anymore from the creature that loomed over him, its hot breath on his neck. The man turned his head around to face his fate. It was one person at first, but then 4 more appeared from the darkness like ghostly apparitions. They surrounded him, the dying man, like a group of reapers. All of them were pale, their eyes empty and lifeless, and their mouths a straight line. Each one had a hole in the chest with a beating black heart inside. However, some of them had shoulder-length hair, a few had short cuts, and one had long dreadlocks cascading down their back. Their faces were all handsome, but they were also different in their own unique way. "Fine, kill me, you monsters!" the man shouted. "You already killed all my friends and my guild. What more do you want from me?" "We want." The Blackheart stomped his foot down and broke the man's spine. "Revenge." With a gasp of breath, the man's body went limp. He became crippled. He couldn't feel his legs or anything from his waist down. The Blackheart with dreadlocks crouched beside the man, grabbed his face with his big hands, and squeezed it like it were a stress ball. The eyes popped out, and then the head was twisted violently until it separated from the body. The Blackheart looked at the head's mangled face and then tossed it aside with a face of boredom. The head rolled down the hill and landed in a patch of wild flowers. They were standing on a hill, overlooking the valley below. They saw a town hidden in the distance, shrouded in the morning mist. Dre Kinnear Sepal Dryer. Eip Dre Heel O Tear Dryer. Alul. Lurul. They spoke a forgotten language that echoed through the valley, a language lost to time. The Blackheart, with his shoulder-length hair and a face that was quite soft and gentle, stood in front of them, and his mouth stretched wide. With a widely stretched mouth, he let out a scream that echoed through the mists of the morning, through the valley below, and to every corner of the island. The scream sounded unnatural. It didn't sound like it contained any words, just pure, guttural terror. However, every Blackheart understood every word of the scream and felt their blood run cold. Ipelfial Nile. We found him. It didn't matter whether they were already fighting someone, near death, or looking for an escape route. After hearing those words in the scream, they started running towards the place. Toward the town of Kurashima, the location of their god's killer. The South Beach. The fight was pretty much over, around 30 Blackhearts remained, and none of them were without injuries. Now, they gave up on fighting and started running back to the forest. It looked like they were just retreating, afraid for their lives. However, they ran through the blades, wincing in pain and leaving a trail of blood behind them. Instead of being afraid, they seemed to be desperate to go somewhere. After reaching the forest, they rushed through the low-hanging branches, thick foliage, and dense underbrush. The Queen's Blade mercenaries ran after them. "Where in the hell are they going?" Calamity asked while fixing up his hair tie, tying his lengthy, crimson hair into a tight bun. Arxam and Saphira exchanged a glance, and they didn't need to speak a word, both understood what their sibling wanted. They ordered a squadron from the Dying Star Guild and followed the Blackheart into the forest. Digby took a deep breath, also wanting to continue the chase, but he noticed that his guild members were exhausted. After all, they were just arch-warriors, and they had already been fighting non-stop for hours. The difference in stamina between arch-warriors and ranks above them was stark and undeniable. "Ah, you must be Crimson Hounds." Calamity came to them with a fake smile on his face. "Sir Calamity." Digby nodded. While he was Prime Mercenary, a rank above Calamity, he knew it wouldn't take long for him to pass him in ranks. Thus, he was rather respectful. "I don't see your S-ranker with you," Calamity said with a smile. "Is he hiding in that little inn of his?" Digby didn't answer because he didn't know where he was. He just remembered Corey taking him somewhere, and then they asked him where he was. Corey only answered that he was safe and well. "Well, I don't blame you, Calamity chuckled. He is weak, after all. Haha, there was already a rumor of him dying during your sea trip. I was wondering how someone so weak became a S-ranker, but I am glad that he was fine. After all. Digby just smiled and nodded. Inwardly, he was furious but didn't show it. It was widely known how arrogant and egocentric Calamity was. It must have hurt his ego after not being the most recent S-ranker anymore, which took away the spotlight and gave it to Adam. Calamity, get your ass over here! Mauricio shouted. Calamity rolled his eyes in annoyance, however, as soon as he turned around, he was all smiles again and went rushing over to where Mauricio was standing and started carrying away the jars filled with black hearts. I really don't like him, Lucette said with crossed arms. Two-faced people are the worst. Keep those thoughts to yourself, Digby said. Calamity, one day, will be fighting for the seat of the king. It's best not to speak too openly against him. I know. Lucette said with a whisper. I just wouldn't want to be around when that happens. Who knows, he might make slavery legal just for the sake of it. If he desires to do so, he has the right to do it, Digby said. Only the strongest can become the king. And if that is his wish, then so be it. The members of the Crimson Hounds looked dissatisfied with Calamity. They thought it was unlucky that someone like him was blessed with so much talent and potential. Luckily, he wasn't the only one with immense talent. There were Saphira and Arxum, who'll be Calamity's main contenders in the future. Then there was Adam, and when they thought about him, smiles broke across their faces. They also had a person among them who was blessed with overflowing talent. Perhaps one day, a person with a crimson cloak will sit on the throne. Everyone! At that moment, a panicky-looking man rushed to the beach. He looked somewhat young. Around Adam's age, but was actually older than he looked. He looked startled, wearing bloodied armor. The Blackhearts are attacking Kuroshima. What? Digby and others exclaimed. The town of Kuroshima had a way to prevent attacks from the Blackhearts. It was why they never even bothered to attack that place. Now, for some odd reason, they were. Crimson Hounds, led by Digby, joined the panicky-looking man and started running back to the Kuroshima. Mauricio watched them leave, then ignored it all and returned on harvesting the hearts off the corpses. Those were worth a lot of money, which was the only thing he was caring about. Chapter 130, Kuroshima surrounded. An army of the Blackhearts surrounded the peaceful town of Kuroshima. Their numbers seemed to increase with each passing moment. However, they were unable to enter the town, which was occupied by more and more mercenaries. A translucent barrier emitted a faint hum as it repelled all attempts at breaching its defenses. It was a barrier that was fueled with magic energy. It's something that 5 major cities also have, but it's much larger in scale. It was created for situations like this, where the safety and security of the city's inhabitants were of the utmost importance. However, Kuroshima's barrier wasn't as strong. It was starting to crack and show signs of weakening, causing concern among the mercenaries. The strength of the Blackhearts varied drastically, but most of them were arch-warrior level or even above. Such firepower was very formidable. Thus, cracks appeared, pushing the barrier closer to its breaking point. Inside the town, worry grew. Nearly 100 mercenaries managed to return to the town before the Blackhearts had it completely surrounded. The rest of the mercenaries were spread across the island, possibly not knowing what was happening. In the town, the mercenaries just stood with their own guilds. Some were whispering about abandoning their posts and fleeing the town altogether. After all, it was just a town, and it didn't seem worth it to risk their lives over it. However, after gazing outside the barrier, they realized the escape was simply impossible, unless they wanted to fight through the horde of creatures that surrounded them on all sides. Everyone! An old, calm voice sounded. Everyone turned their heads to Cory, who was walking towards them with a black-haired young man by his side. Adam! Digby and the rest of the Crimson Hounds stood up, relief washing over them after seeing him fine and well. This is truly a bad situation, Corey said with a chuckle. We'll all die unless we work together. Where the hell is the Imperial Order? A rough-sounding guild master of Fairy Whip asked, his voice filled with frustration. It's their job to keep this town safe. No need to worry about that, Corey said with a smile. Mikhail is coming. Hearing that, many frustrated folks quieted down. With such a simple sentence, the tension in the air dissipated like a fart in the wind. Mikhail, the right-hand man of the king, was coming. So, what'll we do? A person asked. The barrier won't last long, most likely, it will break apart before Mikhail arrives. Corey said, and then continued. We could try to reinforce it with our magic, which will buy us a couple of minutes, but I have other plans. We could isolate the Blackhearts. If we make a hole in the barrier, barely the size of an adult human, they might stop trying to force their way through and instead use that opening to enter the town. If the barrier completely breaks apart, we'll just be surrounded and overwhelmed. We need to stop them from breaking the barrier, and the only thing to do is let them inside the town. I have a question. Saphira stepped forth. Since Orion wasn't right here in the town, Saphira was in control of the Dying Star Guild. As soon as some of the mercenaries saw her, they quieted down and relaxed significantly. Her presence had a calming effect on them. Adam looked at her, and he felt a wave of nostalgia wash over him. She looks young and healthy. I only remember her having black eye bags under her eyes from her sleepless nights. Adam chuckled to himself. It made him happy to see her like this. Miss Saphira, what is it? Corey asked with a smile. What if the Blackhearts don't buy it? They are not stupid. If we make the hole small enough, it's easy for us to kill them since they have to enter the town individually. It's an effective strategy against weak chaos beings, but we are dealing with something much stronger. I have a feeling that if the hole is small, they'll just choose to not enter the town and destroy the barrier instead. Without realizing it, she said Blackhearts as if she didn't care about revealing it to everyone else. The mercenaries frowned, wondering what this Blackheart was and whether it was just a name she thought for those black-hearted individuals. Most of the mercenaries, who weren't aware of the truth, called them the Pale Walkers. So, you want to make a larger hole? Corey asked and chuckled warmly. Not a bad idea. However, it'll put more pressure on our tanks. He had a simple plan: have the tanks at the front, then infantry in the middle, and archers. And magicians at the back. Do we have enough tanks? Saphira asked. Corey looked around and counted the number of tanks. Once he was done, he wryly smiled and shook his head. 8. That won't be enough. Brother. Saphira turned to Arxum. You do have a shield, right? You can act as a tank for this time. Arxum nodded, then strapped his axe to his back and took out a long shield. Other guilds also chose a few of their damage dealers to act as tanks. Corey, may I as well? Adam asked. Hey! Corey turned to him with round eyes. That's a pretty dangerous job for someone like you. Are you sure? Adam. Digby walked over to him with a stern expression. Return back inside. It's still too early for you to be fighting on the front lines. Adam frowned. He wasn't strong enough to fight Blackhearts, but he believed that his tanking skills were needed. Unfortunately, he can't leave the front lines. Corey said with a wry smile. Otherwise, the plan will not work. What do you mean? Digby asked with a frown. Others turned to them after hearing their conversation, curious about what Corey meant. Corey took out the brown, dirty pouch and showed the broken crystals inside. A few didn't recognize them, but the ones that did exclaimed in shock. Broken fragments of respawn crystal. Adam destroyed the respawn crystal, Corey said. Those creatures outside the barrier are here for him. All eyes landed on Adam, shock evident on their faces. A thought arose in their minds. Wasn't this the second respawn crystal he destroyed? Lucette covered her mouth in shock and looked at Adam with a gaze of disbelief. Saphira looked with her round eyes at Adam, a deep frown on her face. She thought he seemed ordinary, like a neighborhood kid you can find anywhere, but he had accomplished several impossible tasks. Corey thought about it further and smiled. I think Adam being on the front lines works in our favor. They are already after him, so he already has their aggro. I say we use that to our advantage. Digby crossed his arms, not a fan of the plan. He had heard that Adam did well as a tank in the raid on the 10th floor. However, the 10th floor was nothing compared to this. I can do it, Adam said to Digby. All right, fine. Digby scratched the back of his head. I'll be your support fighter, I'll help you if need be. That's fine. A slight distance away, a group of mercenaries looked at them with hostile gazes. They were all holding shields that looked like they were cracked, but they were just painted to look that way. They were the members of the Shattered Shields.